So we will begin in just a minute. We have several attendees. We might wait just a couple more minutes. I want to respect people who get on, on time. At the same time, we might just let a couple more people join, and then we will start. We will begin in a few minutes with the folks from Somos Sur, who are the folks who work on our interpretation. Some of you know this if you've worked with us before. The Somos Sur, we are the South Collective. And Juliana and Cristal will be our interpreters today. We'll start with them in just a minute. We're going to give another minute or two, then we'll start. And then once they have explained the interpretation function, then we will start. So una vez que las compañeras de Somos Sur, Cristal y Juliana, una vez que ellas hayan descrito para los que tal vez y las que tal vez están usando por primera vez este sistema, entonces yo voy a dar la bienvenida e introducción formal. Ok, so vamos a dar un minuto o dos, pero ya casi vamos a empezar. Los panelistas, las panelistas también son participantes en el diálogo con todos ustedes, okay? So we're going to start in just a second. Okay. Miguel, glad you could make it, Miguel. Qué bien que pudiste llegar, Lucy. Got some West Coast representation in the house. Kelly Suzanne, Jason, glad you could make it, Jason. Little Village in the house. Eva, that's Summit in the house. Eleuteria, that's Pilsen in the house. Many houses, Alexandra, and others from the Farm Worker Landscaper Advocacy Project. Dolores Castañeda from Little Village. I know you can only stay a little while, Dolores. I'm glad you had time. Guadalupe, back of the yards. Glad, qué bien que puedes estar con nosotros, Guadalupe. Gracias. Nelson, that's Summit as well. Cool. Sharon, that's Evergreen Park in the house too. That's great. Okay. So I think we are going to go ahead because I know a couple people who are on can maybe only stay about half an hour. Others can stay longer, and others might get on in more like 15 or 20 minutes because of work schedules. Adriana. All right, Adriana. Awesome. Glad you could make it. So Juliana and Cristal, I don't know if you are okay to start the orientación sobre interpretación. You guys cool? You all cool? Okay, so we're going to go a quick orientation on using the interpretation function, right? The translation function, Spanish, English, simultaneous. So you can speak and listen in whatever language you're comfortable. And again, it's my pleasure. They have been with us. Is this the 10th time, 11th time since September of last year? The collective from Somos Sur, el colectivo de Somos Sur. So please take it away.
Hola, buenas tardes a todos. Good afternoon, everyone. Mi nombre es Chris, o Cristal. My name is Crystal. Like Leone said, I am with Somos Sur, the interpreting collective. Estoy con Somos Sur, el colectivo de interpretación. Como mencionó Leone. Primero lo voy a hacer en inglés y luego lo voy a decir en español. So if you see the image on the left, if you joined the call from a computer, see the image on your right if you signed into the Zoom from a phone. If your primary language is English, please find the globe in your menu bar and select the English channel. If you are bilingual, you can keep the interpretation off in order to speak and listen in both languages. Once you select your language preferences via the channels, you can leave it that way for the rest of the call. If you have any issues with interpretation, please let us know in the chat, and then we can work something out and try to support. Okay, si se metieron al Zoom por computadora, I'm going to explain it in Spanish if you can go back to the other slide for folks. Thank you. Okay, para acceder a la interpretación por computadora, ven el globito que está hacia abajo. Escojan el idioma que se sientan más cómodos de escuchar, inglés o español. Si son bilingües, pueden tener Modo de interpretación apagado para que puedan escuchar y hablar en los dos idiomas. Si accedieron a la interpretación por el teléfono, van a ver 3 puntitos hacia abajo a la derecha de su celular. Escójanlo, le van a salir el menú. Escojan interpretación de idiomas. Y luego escojan el idioma que se sientan más cómodo y finalicen para asegurar que estén en el modo de interpretación donde se sientan más cómodos y puedan escuchar. Si tienen problemas, por favor, déjenos saber en el chat para poder apoyarles. Okay. One person at a time. So during the event, I'd like to remind you all, one person at a time. Interpreters can only interpret for one person, and they don't want to be put in the position of having to decide which voice has privilege over the other. Por favor, un diva, un micrófono, una persona a la vez. Los interpretadores pueden interpretar a una persona a la vez y no queremos estar en la posición en el puesto de tener que escoger cuál voz tiene más privilegio sobre la otra. Speak up, speak loud and clear, ideally using headphones with a mic. Interpreters need to be able to hear the speaker over the sound of their own voice when doing simultaneous interpretation. Por favor, hablen en voz alta y claro. Idealmente usen audífonos con un micrófono. Intérpretes necesitan que escuchar la persona que está hablando sobre nuestra propia voz cuando estemos haciendo interpretación simultánea. Slow down. Facilitators, presenters, trainers, and participants, anyone that is speaking during the event, speak at a moderate pace. Take a breath after each sentence. Take a pause after switching speakers and asking questions. Slowing down supports everyone, not just interpreters. Hablen despacio si son facilitadores, presentadores, entrenadores, participantes o cualquier persona que tenga la voz durante el evento. Por favor, hablen en un paso moderado. Respiren después de cada oración. Pausen cuando estén cambiando de quién va a hablar o cuando estén haciendo preguntas. Hablando un poco más despacio o con un paso más moderado apoya a todos, no nada más a los intérpretes. Muchas gracias a todos. Si tienen preguntas o cualquier problema durante el evento, por favor.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Crystal. Cristal, thank you. And so give me half a second here. I'm going to lock Cristal and Juliana in. Give me half a second here. Let me know, you two, if that gets you in. Okay. You okay, Crystal? Cool. Okay. Okay, so as they said, como ellas acaban de decir, you can see below, and I'm going to mention one last time just to make sure. Down below at the bottom of your screen, you see something that looks like kind of a little globe with a couple of lines through it. And if you click on that, you'll see an English or Spanish. You can choose one of those, or you can leave it off if you're bilingual and can kind of listen to either one as you like, okay? So, si última vez rapidito, si ven abajo, debajo, al fondo de la pantalla van a ver un globito que dice interpretación, interpretation, hay un globito. Si hacen clic, si apretan arriba, van a poder escoger inglés o español. Dice English, Spanish y pueden escoger, ¿ok? Muy bien. Okay. So we're going to go ahead then and start. I'm going to do the main part in English, although there's so many Spanish speakers. Boy, I could almost choose Spanish. It's a close call. I'll go with the tradition here of English, but I'm going to say a couple words about working family solidarity and these teachings and racial unity dialogues. And then I'm going to turn it over to the panelists, the folks offering remarks. So it's kind of half teaching, half racial unity dialogue, because we're going to have several women activists with Working Family Solidarity who are going to share some experiences. And then after that, We're going to have questions, comments, whatever you all want to talk about. The women who speak first might have more things they want to add later, or some of you who are on might have a variety of things. I know one or two of you may not be able to stay on too long. If you can get in a question or comment before you leave, that'd be great. If you can't, if some of the presenters are still sharing their remarks, please leave it in the chat. Like, sorry, I have to go, but this is something that's important because we will be recording this and we'll put it up so you can have access to this on our website. So my name is Leone Jose Bicchieri. I'm the proud son of an Italian immigrant and a Mexican immigrant. After my parents divorced, they remarried a white woman from Maryland and an African-American man from Cincinnati. So I grew up between a couple households that reflected a few different cultures. And I think that made me really interested and gave me a passion for trying to see or recognize how similar we are, but how somehow other forces keep us from really coming together as working people to sort of get that justice that we all deserve. So that's kind of been my passion. And I've said this on maybe every teaching, and that is someone once told me that you teach that which you most want to learn. So I, as executive director of Working Family Solidarity, as the founding executive director, and just as a human being who's been through a few things in a few countries, I don't profess that I or our organization have figured out how to have racial unity. But we believe in racial unity, number one, to destroy racism, number two, to build power for working people, and number three, just because it's the right thing to do if we can come together. And strategically, obviously, we're the vast majority of people in the world, just working people. So thank you so much for joining us. We have been holding a racial unity dialogue or a racial justice teach-in every month, and one time we did 2 a month since September. So it's been 8 or 9, maybe 10 sessions now. Thank you. Some of you have been on almost every one. We appreciate you joining. And tonight, just to remind you, our focus is going to be women's rights, or in a way you could say lack of rights for women, especially women of color, and especially women workers, and especially working women of color. So we're going to have several activists from Working Family Solidarity, either member leaders, people who are or have been on our steering committee, coordinators of our women's committee, people who've been volunteers. They're going to share some of their experiences regarding the multiple layers of oppression that working women face: sexism, misogyny, racism, if you're a woman of color, and abuses as workers. So we see working women of color as the absolute most oppressed people in the world. And therefore, if we're going to be serious about getting things right, they must have a key voice in our leadership. I, as a man, can imagine some of the problems, but I don't know them personally. So it's our duty to give space to our sisters. And as men, I hope those who are on, and I'm going to urge a lot more to think about it, but we have to figure out what we have done wrong ourselves, not look at every other man as blaming, but and us as blameless. But we all need to correct the way we work with our sisters in the working class movement, especially of color. So I'm really, really thrilled. I appreciate you joining us. I will come back to this later, but I am very thrilled that we have folks from the Farm Worker and Landscaper Advocacy Project, FLAP, and I'm sure they're going to have 1 or 2 things to say later, maybe even 3 things to say. We also have Kelly Suzanne Salisbury from the Woods Fund. We at Working Family Solidarity are a proud grantee through the capacity building initiative of Wood Fund and the Crossroads Collaborative. So we appreciate the support. We're going to start off our round of comments from our 5 presenters. I did notice as of a couple minutes ago that not all 5 have got on. So we're going to go with those who are on, and then we'll have a conversation. The first person is going to be Claudia Galeno Sanchez. Claudia has been with Working Family Solidarity since our inception, almost 5 years ago. She's co-coordinator of our women's committee. She's from the state of Puebla in Mexico. And for those of you who aren't clear, that's where Cinco de Mayo comes from, right? Where a small contingent of Mexican soldiers routed a much superior army of French soldiers. So that's a great, great part of not Mexicans' Independence Day, but of the Cinco de Mayo celebration. So Claudia's worked in all kinds of difficult labor in Chicago, and she's going to share her story and why she's been a women's rights and worker rights activist for so many years. So Claudia, please.
Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Claudia Galeno. Bria. Say hi. I'm just saying hi to Brigida. It's been so long. Well, cuando llegué a Estados Unidos, ya tengo mucho tiempo en este país. Vengo de México, soy mexicana. So, cuando llegué a Estados Unidos, yo realmente no sabía que en este país las cosas estuvieran como están. Realmente yo pensaba que era un país con más derechos, sobre todo para las mujeres. Pero ya una vez aquí me di cuenta de que las fábricas están llenas de mujeres, piden a las mujeres como si fueran, no sé, tráeme 50 mujeres, tráeme fábrica de champú, quiero 80 mujeres. Y es así como las compañías, las oficinas temporales piden a las personas como si fuéramos, no sé, ganado. Y me empecé a dar cuenta de que realmente las cosas no están como nosotros pensamos en México, pensábamos que estaban aquí en Estados Unidos. Entonces, me empecé a dar cuenta también que había mucho abuso en contra de la mujer, mucho acoso sexual, especialmente me daba cuenta que las mamás solteras sentían la presión de aguantar. No solo las mamás solteras, las otras mamás que también tienen un esposo, pero que en realidad el dinero no alcanza, el dinero del esposo no alcanza para sobrellevar todos los gastos de la casa. Entonces la mamá siente la presión, la necesidad también de ir a trabajar, porque obviamente un sueldo no es suficiente. Entonces, aunque sea mamá soltera, tenga que dejar a su bebé, aunque no sea mamá soltera, pero también tienen que dejar a sus bebés para irse a trabajar. No se me hace justo porque por irse a trabajar realmente los niños crecen sin la atención de uno del papá o de la mamá, realmente crecen sin la atención de los dos padres. Entonces, no sé, los abusos que yo veía en los trabajos, me hizo darme cuenta de que las cosas no estaban bien y de que yo empecé a buscar diferentes ayudas, organizaciones para saber qué era lo que se podía hacer, porque yo no siento que es humano una manera de cómo se les trata a las personas en el trabajo, de cómo se les explota, de cómo las mujeres se sienten abusadas, pero al mismo tiempo sienten que tienen que aguantar los abusos. Entonces fue así como yo empecé a buscar ayuda. Me dicen cuando se me termine mi tiempo porque a mí se me va el tiempo.
Sigue.
Entonces, ahora que soy mamá, yo me doy cuenta que realmente debería de haber ayudas económicas para las mamás, especialmente para las mamás que se quedan en casa y que no pueden trabajar, porque realmente para mí siento que es muy importante que las mamás pasen sus primeros meses o tal vez sus primeros años de vida de los niños con ellos. Entonces, yo siento que como mamá, yo siento que debería de haber ayuda, debería de haber más permisos en los trabajos, permisos pagados, para que las mamás pasen un poco más de tiempo con sus hijos. Y la verdad, yo me doy cuenta que nosotras como mujeres, especialmente mujeres de color, especialmente mujeres inmigrantes, tenemos muchas desventajas en cuanto a trabajos, en cuanto a abusos, en cuanto a acoso sexual, tantas y tantas cosas. Y yo creo que estamos cayendo, o que más bien caemos, o existe un círculo vicioso porque las mamás en este caso no pueden pasar tiempo con sus hijos, tampoco pueden llevarlos a un museo, que al acuario, a pasear, al parque. Con el poco dinero que ganamos, tampoco podemos comprarles buena alimentación a nuestros hijos. ¿Qué pasa? Cuando los niños se van a la escuela, obviamente todos estos detalles a nuestros niños los van poniendo en desventaja. Cuando nuestros niños van a la escuela, no tienen el mismo rendimiento académico que otros niños. Y cuando los niños salen de la escuela, o si se gradúan de lo que se gradúen, no van a tener probablemente los mismos se puede decir que buenos salarios o buenos trabajos. Entonces, vuelve el círculo vicioso. Por lo regular, estos niños muy probablemente van a caer en los mismos trabajos que los papás. Entonces, yo creo que todo va dando vuelta, y lo cual no se me hace justo, la verdad. Así como están diseñadas las cosas, a las escuelas, de hecho, para los niños, yo veo que para los niños con menos recursos económicos, o los papás de menos recursos económicos, los niños tienen la educación, se puede decir que es un poquito más, no sé si decirlo, como menos, pues menos buena, en pocas palabras. Entonces, yo creo que tenemos muchas desventajas como personas de color, y muchas más desventajas como mujeres de color. Entonces, nosotros en la organización estamos creando un grupo de mujeres que nos estamos enfocando ahorita ¿cómo se dice? A crear mariposas, en pocas palabras. Juntamos los huevos, después estas larvitas, las orugas, la mariposa, y las mandamos a volar. Entonces, de esta manera vamos a estar ayudando el medio ambiente, vamos a estar ayudando los polinizadores. También con nuestro proyecto también vamos a ayudar a la naturaleza, a las abejas, el medio ambiente. Posiblemente en el futuro tal vez no sé, un cultivo de hortalizas para que las mamás tengan mejor comida para dar a sus hijos. Y la única manera que nosotros pensamos que había es que nosotros mismos lo empecemos desde cero, se puede decir, porque realmente, ahí está Brigida, mira, y Karina.
Vi el Papa Cardenal
¿sí?
en la casa de Ana.
Es que tenemos un nido de cardenales en nuestro jardín. Disculpen, no me salí de tema, pero bueno, ya voy de nuevo. Entonces,
¡Vi el papá!
Entonces,
deja
lo
que tu
que
mami
queremos
termine.
es que...
Sigue.
Lo que queremos en sí es que las personas las mamás tengamos un poco de acceso a lugares verdes para llevar a nuestros hijos, enseñarles, y tal vez en el futuro un cultivo de hortalizas orgánicas para darles de comer a nuestros hijos. Yo creo que se me terminó mi tiempo, ¿verdad? Pero por último,
Sí.
quiero agradecer a la organización, a Working Family Solidarity, por darnos la oportunidad de apoyar nuestro proyecto, de que juntos vamos a crecer el proyecto. Estamos dispuestos a trabajar, y pues con las personas que quieran apoyar, se comunican con nosotros. Y yo creo que se me terminó.
No, hablaste súper bien, Clau. Hablaste súper bien. Eso es lo que necesitamos. Hoy son varias personas, varias mujeres, cada quien ofreciendo unos minutos, obviamente solo un poco, pero vamos a seguir en el futuro hablando más sobre ese tema. Muchas gracias, Claudia. Vamos a seguir ahorita con Brigida Proto. Sorry, well, I guess it was translated into whatever language, so I think I broke into a little bit of Spanish, but we're going to go next with Brigida Proto, whom I've known for many years. She is originally from Italy, and she spent some years in Chicago, and we worked together on many things, many great projects. She is currently working based in Paris, France, on many great things. I do want to give a shout out to Brigida because imagine what time it is here in Chicago. It's almost 6:30 p.m. and she's in Paris, so something like 7 hours later. So she's essentially staying up super late, almost early in the morning, to join us for a little bit. And she's going to share some things with us before we go on to the next presenter. So Brigida, please, and thank you so much for being here with us.
So thanks, Leone, and I will give you only a few remarks about. I was thinking when you told me about the teaching event, I was thinking about my work, and I will have only a few remarks on the issue of women's empowerment against violence, and based on my experiences that I had in the United States, in Chicago with you, and in Paris currently. And these are two experiences that they are different, but at the same time, I think that what they have in common, Paris and Chicago, is the idea that women's empowerment is a process during which community organizers and women, victims of violence and abuses, develop together three abilities: to inquire, to discuss, and to experiment. I would like to show you what I mean by focusing on Chicago first. So on Chicago, I was at the Chicago Workers Collaborative, while Leone was the executive director. And while I was there, what the association was experiencing was the rise of cases of sexual harassment against Latino working women. So in this case, what I saw was that the association was acting for women's empowerment by pushing women towards inquiry, discussion, and experimentation. What I mean is that pushing women towards inquiry was that when I was there, I saw that women victims of sexual harassment used to turn from victims to co-inquirer, along with lawyers and community organizers, in order to collect proofs of the abuses and to prepare the lawsuits. So the role was very active. There was also discussion, and discussion was, while I was there was a women committee, and this women committee was acting as a sort of healing space to raise awareness on women as a group. But what it was strong was that they were trying to push women towards experimentation. And what I mean is that the Women Committee was working also as a sort of lab for democratic experimentation. The association was at the frontier of two neighborhoods, Englewood, Afro-American, and Back of the Yards. And what I was seeing there was that there were the first Afro-American women coming to the Women Committee. They were sharing their experiences of violence against with Latino women, and what I saw is that they were together. They were developing a sort of interethnic empathy and understanding, well beyond taking for granted identities. So this was my experience in Chicago. What I realized is that women's empowerment against violence, it was a sort of mixture of the ability to inquire on your case of violence, to discuss with the other people, and to experiment something that can create something new. So now we turn to Paris. And in Paris, I'm working on the problem of human trafficking for sexual exploitation. In particular, I'm working with Nigerian women coming to Europe. And this is a very huge and dramatic problem in Europe. Just to give you some idea of the numbers, I have here, just let me wait. Let me see. So just to give you an idea of the evolution of the problem, is that when they arrive in Europe, they were 435 in 2013. They became 1,500 in 2014, and they became 5,000 in 2015. This was the year that, of the so-called refugee crisis in Europe. So in this case, to deal with this very vulnerable population, what I'm realizing is that the ability to inquire turns into a very street level emergency response, dealing with justice, health, and social work directly on the street. Discussion is not possible as it was in Chicago. The time of discussion is reduced to an expected moment of women speaking out on the street, and sometimes at the association when they decide to come. And experimentation is based on the ways in which women use activities offered by the association to heal them spiritually and make them find their way of getting out of prostitution and reinvent somehow themselves as working women. So these are, just to compare, what was my experience in Chicago and in Paris. These are two different problems, but I think that what I realized is that what they have in common was this kind of pushing women towards inquiry, towards discussing, towards experimentation. And so, just to conclude, I would like to give you some open questions that are coming from Chicago and from from Paris. With regard to Paris, because I think that Paris is a little bit behind Chicago. So Paris, what I'm asking now is to what extent this sort of empowerment that is reduced to a street level emergency response can push trafficked women towards an interethnic understanding of women's exploitation, that it was somehow what we were doing in Chicago. And finally, coming back to Chicago, how can we turn what I learned at the Women Committee, this kind of interethnic empathy and understanding, how can we turn this understanding, this interethnic understanding, into creative action and political change? These are my open questions. I don't have any answers. It's just a way forward to reflect on the issue of women's empowerment and violence, based on my personal experience.
Thank you very much, Brigida. Mille grazie. So thank you
Grazie
very
a voi.
much. Yeah, no, it's great. And gosh, we're just scratching the surface today. But again, for some of you who are joining us for the first time, which are only maybe a couple people now, but we've been doing these roughly once a month. And before the pandemic, we used to do these in person, usually around very specific projects or campaigns for working family solidarity. That was primarily around, it has been around jobs and housing. And then the three interconnected things that we have learned: you cannot do worker rights and better jobs, tenant rights and better housing without, which are immigration, civil rights, and criminal justice. Because the way, especially people of color, have been criminalized, and the immigration and civil rights issues, where the wealthy elite have found very specific ways to more effectively oppress African American workers, Latinx workers, and so on. And I think now we're especially focused tonight on all of that, but now even worse for our sisters, right? For workers. And I think one of the sad things is we men workers, we participate in that oppression of our sisters. And first of all, we should be ashamed of that. It hurts. Secondly, if we want to build power for working people, we're the majority of people on earth, of course, low and moderate income people, we cannot oppress other workers. So if we're serious about working class power as men, then whether it's moral or just using our brain, we cannot leave half of the workers in this world out of that struggle. And they're going to have leadership positions. So we men are going to have to grow a lot. Thank you very much, Brigida. We're now going to go with Tameka Gavin, longtime friend of mine now, longtime activist for women's rights, children's rights. Tameka was our first community organizer with Working Family Solidarity. She's remained a very important activist in the community with us, and I'm proud to present Tameka Gavin.
Hi, thank you, Leone. Good evening, everyone. My background may be a little noisy. I have some little ones running around, playing, and probably gonna get yelled at in a minute. But I just wanted to actually talk about my experiences and my work history as to why I have the passion that I have for working with families, particularly women and children. So I worked a few years back at a comprehensive drug treatment and recovery home, which allowed young children from infancy to age 5 to reside in the facility with the mom while she's in recovery. A lot of this was pretty much by DCFS. A lot of this was by the judge. They had to, the judge actually sentenced the women to live on the recovery units. A lot of our ladies actually kind of just wanted to do their own things without raising their children, because the judge allowed for their babies to stay on this unit with them. And a lot of the women just wanted to get themselves together. So instead of having the women go back to prison, or instead of having their babies taken away from them, we kind of like put together what we're doing now, a women's committee, where we pretty much worked with our mothers to make sure that they had time for themselves, because the only thing that the judges and DCFS wanted was for them to be a mother. And because my background is in early childhood education, how can these babies thrive How can young toddlers thrive when their parents aren't giving them what they need, the necessities? So we pretty much built a women's committee around, we had values and rules and different things like that on the unit. And it worked out perfectly until I left, and I heard that a lot of women had started, back going to jail and had to give their babies up to DCFS. But the women committees, because we understand one another, is just so very important. It's so important for us to keep fighting for each other, keep fighting for the rights of those who aren't able to make conscious decisions at that time. Every mother wants to be with their child. There are some circumstances where, of course, that wasn't allowed, or if we knew that there was some redlining, we would definitely get that family more help. But also, I just wanted to say that I went to a funeral today. I don't know if you guys heard about the mass shooting that took place in Inglewood last week. And it was 3 women killed and 1 man. 2 of those women who were killed were mothers. One of the women had 5 children. That's the funeral I went to today. So her family is stuck raising her 5 babies, and the ages range from 12 to 4 years of age. So of course, I'm going to continue to look for resources for this particular family because they need them. And again, I just think that it's important for us to continue to stick together and work with one another. My heart goes out to so many, because it just seems like this year alone, a lot of women, mothers, are losing their lives, and these babies are just out here like orphanages. I mean, they're being left as orphans, and it just breaks my heart to see this. And in this case, to know that this family, this is what they're going through. The other thing I wanted to pretty much say is that it's important for us, not just as women, but as people, period, to just love each other. I lost my mom last year to COVID. And so my sister was also sick. And we definitely have to continue to build a support system among each other, whether we're family or not, or just friends or neighbors. And so we had to move together, and that's why I have the little ones here. It's 2 small ones, but she needed the support. I mean, we both needed the support from losing my mom and then my sister being sick as well. But I'm just gonna leave you with a quote that I actually saw today. Come on. So don't settle for the bare minimum. That it says you deserve the best, but I'm gonna say that we deserve the best, and we have to continue to fight for each other and continue to fight and love to help one another. And that concludes my little spiel. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Tameka. It's always great to see you. And I remember when Tameka and I first met in a little coffee shop down there on 51st Street. And I think we had a lot of agreement that a lot of things, that Blacks and Latinx people need to come together. A lot of different neighborhoods need to come together, and we need to figure out how to support each other. And I know you've worked tons of years with women, kids, and thanks a lot for sharing. And again, any of the folks offering remarks. As we hear from other people very soon, you'll be welcome, of course, to sort of respond or get into the dialogue. But we'll move on to the next person, who will be Karina Rodriguez. And Karina is also one of the coordinators of Working Family Solidarity's Women's Committee. And she's going to share a few words with us. Karina, I think I saw you there, and please go ahead.
Hola, buenas tardes. ¿Sí me escuchó? Bueno, yo realmente no me había tocado participar en alguna organización. Pero desde que comencé a ser mamá, comencé a asistir a grupos de mamás, mamá primeriza, a grupos donde podíamos compartir nuestras experiencias como mamás o como, pues sí, madres de familia, ¿no? Y en esos grupos nos damos cuenta que no todas, o más bien todas las mamás, todas las mujeres, tenemos a veces el mismo problema respecto pues a la violencia en la familia, ¿no? A veces no es violencia física, a veces la violencia es psicológica, a veces la violencia tiene que ver con que tú eres mujer, tú te quedas en la casa, tú te quedas con los hijos y pues tú no aprendes nada de otras cosas, ¿no? Pero ¿qué pasa en el momento que hay una pérdida, como dijo Tameka, de algún familiar, de un esposo en el hogar? ¿Qué hace esa mamá que nunca se preparó para poder tener un trabajo, para poder apartarse un poquito de sus hijos y dejarlos para tener algo personal? Creo que pues me ha tocado escuchar de parte de mis amistades mucho el que no tienen un pantalón que comprarse, no tienen unos zapatos que comprarse, precisamente como decía la señora Claudia, porque el dinero no ajusta en la casa, pero los esposos le dicen, si vas a buscar trabajo, busca quien te cuide a tus hijos. Creo que las palabras son incorrectas porque sería más correcto decir, ok, lo vamos a intentar y vamos a conseguir que tengas un horario para poder buscar un trabajo, un mejor oportunidad, ¿no? Porque realmente sería para la familia, no solamente para la mamá, no solamente para la mujer. Esa es mi pequeña opinión respecto a la violencia que nosotras como mamás, como mujeres sufrimos. Y respecto al grupo pues en el que estamos con Claudia acerca de la naturaleza, yo comencé rescatando a las monarcas, a la mariposa monarca hace como 5 años. Y yo también creo que es una oportunidad muy bonita de conocer más personas, de involucrar a más mujeres con las cuales a veces uno necesita tener un poquito de comunicación con alguien más. Con esta pandemia estuvimos encerrados por mucho tiempo y muchas personas, pues son incapaces de salir y de buscar ayuda o de buscar amistades para poder desahogarse de su manera de vivir, ¿no? En este grupo, pues ojalá y se unan más mamás, que es la idea, que seamos mamás. Obviamente lo hacemos en el tiempo que se puede, mientras los niños están en la escuela o cosas así. Ya tenemos un horario, pero pues sí, realmente pues nuestro objetivo es la naturaleza, las mariposas, los cardenales, y pues enseñar también a la gente que no sabe de qué tipo de plantas la mariposa llega, se alimenta o deja sus huevecillos porque simplemente las cortan pensando que es maleza. Muchas gracias por este espacio.
Muchas gracias, Karina. Thank you very much. And for those of you who want to stay in touch with the Working Family Solidarity's Women's Committee, you can let us know. My email, I think, was given to you through the webinar, leonejose@workingfamilysolidarity.org, but I can forward on people who are interested to Claudia, to Karina. As Karina mentioned, due to the pandemic, we've had to do a little bit different kind of women's committee. And so the focus recently, as the spring came, has been on something that's important to many Mexican people, which is the monarch butterfly. So that may seem like, what does that have to do with anyone's rights? They go from Canada and the northern part of the United States all the way down to mainly the state of Michoacan in Mexico, west of Mexico City. Hundreds of thousands of monarchs. But it's become a symbol in Mexico and for many Mexican people in the United States of staying in touch with nature, if you will, because when we lose the pollinators, when we lose the monarchs, when we lose bees and so on, it's not just a terrible personal loss, but we will lose our crops and we'll lose our food and we'll lose our green spaces. And so what might seem like, well, you're helping a couple butterflies, what's up with that, is actually a push, and we're going to begin to do it more. The Women's Committee will be deciding how to do that, and the rest of our organization will support them. But it's figuring out how do we use more parts of Chicago for green space. There are a lot of African American women doing all kinds of, taking lots and using that for community produce. So there's a whole aspect of health, a whole aspect of rejecting the fast food industry, a whole aspect of rejecting the food deserts, right? That keep, I think Austin, is the biggest neighborhood, for example, on the west side of African Americans in all of Chicago by population, and has virtually no major healthy grocery store, right? And too many of Latin American people and African American people live in these areas. So the Women's Committee is kind of building from the ground up and looking at also ways to empower women through economic projects as the project develops over time. We're going to go last, definitely not least, woman offering remarks this evening, to Asia Anderson. And Asia's been a supporter and activist with Working Family Solidarity for almost a year. She's been supporting all of our teach-ins and racial unity dialogues. And she's going to have a few comments. And then after that, we'll open it up to other comments and questions and so forth. So Asia, it's our pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you very much, Leonie. I think that some of my experiences are a little bit more corporate or a little bit different. I do have some experience in nonprofit areas, but whenever I thought about this topic, I thought of a lot of things that impacted me on an individual level. Just for example, I started training for a new position, and I was in a training talking to a woman, and she tells me that at some point I will have to collaborate with this guy. And one of the things that she originally thought about him was that he's very kind of rude. He's very direct, very rude. And she thought that it was something that was at her or towards her. And the result was a dialogue with some of the other people that she worked with, and she found out that that's just the way he is, right? They always say, oh, that's just the way he is, right? But if it's a woman that is doing some of the same things or some of things that are similar, right? I've been described as being very direct. I've been described as being very, communicative, and that's just the polite way of them saying, it's right. So if it's a woman that's talking about something specific, or in a specific way, then, you know, she comes off as mean. But when it's a male that's doing the same thing, they come off as, oh, that's just the way they are, and you'll have to get used to him. And so that just kind of brought me back to some of the, I guess, little things that maybe we don't realize in the beginning are kind of, you know, attacks on your character or attacks on you being a woman in the workplace. But then you kind of think about it a little bit later and you realize that the way that women are treated in the workplace aren't the same, right? And I think that it comes down to the biases that we have in that space. And it's not just to say that these biases only affect women. They definitely affect other people in that space. But every single person has a bias, right? I have biases in my spaces as well. And I think it comes down to recognizing what those biases are, because they're going to impact the way that you are. For me, you know, yes, I'm a woman. I'm also a woman of color. I'm Black and Asian. I also am a woman that wears a scarf. So there's layers to that. Initially, all of my interactions in the workplace, I automatically think about my hijab, which is my scarf. I think about, oh, this person is reacting to me this way because of my hijab, or this person is reacting to me because I'm Muslim. And, you know, I'm pretty sure you all have seen all of the media, and a lot of times doesn't really highlight Muslims in a positive light. So automatically I think about my hijab. Then next I think about, okay, well, I'm also Black. A lot of times I'm darker than most of the other people in the room. And then it goes to, okay, I'm a woman as well. I just kind of think about what are the things that we can do to ensure that those biases that are coming at us aren't taking over our interactions, right? Because they're gonna be everywhere. You know that they exist. So what are some of the things that we can do? And personally, I've started, you know, people always say I have direct communication. Well, it's filtered a lot of the times. And I've taken to, you know, turning that filter off if I need to. Of course, still being respectful in whatever way, but call out the bias. Say what you need to say. Whenever I worked in New Hampshire, you know, which is 98% white, I was the only person of color in a lot of spaces. And I had a coworker who would always interrupt me. Anytime I started talking, she would automatically interrupt me. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe it's just me. But no, I started talking to my coworkers and they say they noticed the same thing. So I brought it up to her. I said, I don't know if you recognize that this happens, but every time I start talking, you interrupt me. And I don't automatically want to think that it's because I'm Black and she's white. But, you know, and interrupting is just rude in general. So, but after bringing it up to her, she continued to do the same thing. So then that's when you recognize, okay, it's a little bit different, or there are other reasons that weren't immediately clear that was happening. But I spoke up and I said what I felt impacted me. Not only that, but because I spoke up, others were able to speak up for me as well, right? A lot of times people don't want to defend you, they don't want to say anything, and because it's easier to be silent in a space where if you're not being attacked, you don't have to speak up. But if you notice that you're being treated differently, you can say something, and then others will feel maybe a little bit more comfortable, or they will understand that they can also say something either on their behalf, their own behalf, or on your behalf as well. And I'm going to share this resource in a little bit, but I was listening to a talk on unconscious bias and how it impacts your relationships. And the guy said that there are several things that you can do in these spaces, right? For yourself. Accept and check your unconscious bias, right? Recognize that you have biases. Next, you want to label your bias. What exactly is it that is making you feel this way towards someone? And then figure out ways that you can mitigate that bias. So again, or speaking out against it, or calling it out for someone else, or like some of the other presenters have mentioned, you join a group that makes you feel comfortable. You start a group that, you know, brings other people who are like you together, because, you know, we're always stronger in numbers. And the very first thing that he said always was just start the dialogue. So, you know, it's so hard to speak up sometimes, but people are not they can't read your minds. A lot of times they're going to ignore the fact that they're treating you differently, because they're like, that person doesn't ever say anything, so it probably doesn't bother them. Or they also just don't recognize that what they're saying is bothering you. So start that dialogue and start, you know, from the very beginning with yourself. And then also I would say, recognize that, or the impact of the things that are happening around you, right? Because if you're feeling like you're in a space where you're unsafe, your focus isn't there, especially in the workplace. Your productivity is not there. Your comfort is not there. And if your performance starts to get impacted, they're always going to want to do the first thing that they can to say that you're not doing your job, or that you're not up to par with some of the other performers. And so you have to do the things that you need to do in the workspace in order to make it comfortable for you, because a lot of times we can't afford to not be at work. Some people can afford to change a space that they're not comfortable in. They can quit, they can go along, but a lot of people don't have that luxury. So, you know, bringing it up to managers, whatever you have to do to start that organization. The company that I work for now, they have a workplace inclusion group that they started. Then they also have a book club where they read a book that is written by a person of color every single month, and they discuss that in relation to current events. So there's so many different things that you can do in the workspace that can, I guess, expand your experiences and expand your scope, and also do things to make you feel a little bit more comfortable in the space. And I guess what I wanted to say the most is just, you know, speak up for yourself and start those conversations, or find allies and people who are willing to do the same things with you, because women and people of color are those that are the most impacted by changes in the workplace. Last thing I'm going to say, Leone, is just, you know, to kind of, I guess, support that. And during the pandemic, I think, I cannot remember the stats and I tried to look them up, but women lost the most jobs during the pandemic, and underlying also people of color, right? And so we will always be the ones that are impacted first when it comes to changes in the workplace. So we have to do what we can to make ourselves feel safe, and then to make others who are like us, that we want to bring in with us, safe in those spaces as well. And I do have a couple of things that I'm going to share in the chat afterwards, just some of the articles and some of the webinars or lectures that I had listened to a little bit earlier, in case you wanted to listen to them as well. So thank you.
Thanks a lot, Asia. After 5, you know, terrific people, women sharing great stuff, we do have a little bit more time for a couple of comments. We'll probably try to wrap it up a minute or two before 7:30, so I can just do a quick thank you and close. But we do have a little bit of time. I wanted to go next to Alexandra Sosa, but here's what we're going to do. Asia, if you can help me with this, we're going to let now all the attendees in as panelists, so that it's just easier if you want not only to speak, but just speaking, or if you want to be seen, you can turn on your mic, your video. And if you don't want to be seen, that's okay too. And you can also just put your comment in the chat. So we welcome dialogue. We also don't want to force anyone who's not ready to sort of be on TV or whatever makes you nervous talking to people. But we're going to now let everyone in slowly but surely. I think I see it happening. So you'll all be panelists. Regular Zoom meetings, you don't need this. For webinars, it's a little easier. So as you come in right now, Alexandra, who's the executive director of FLAP, the Farm Worker and Landscaper Advocacy Project. I've known Alexandra for a number of years. I also worked 10 years full-time in the farm worker movement on the West Coast before I came back to the Midwest about 22 years ago. So I have a soft spot in my heart for farm labor, who are among the most, and landscapers, but among the most, exploited people in the United States, and the women even more so. But Alexandra's been a great supporter of ours. We appreciate the work she and I see other people from FLAP are also on. So I wanted to give you a chance, Alexandra, if you wanted to give a comment on the topic that we're talking about, and thank you a lot for being with us.
Muchísimas gracias, Leonie. And I want to start in Spanish. Quiero empezar en español because I'm from Colombia and, I'm here in the United States, but my heart is always in my home country. So, yo estoy aquí en los Estados Unidos, pero por supuesto mi corazón está en mi país de origen. Estas reuniones son muy importantes. These meetings are really, really important. And when I was listening to Brigida, who is in Paris, right? Brigida, so I have a sister who lives in Paris, so I know what time is there right now. Tengo una hermana que vive en París, entonces sé perfectamente qué hora es en París. These things really touch my heart. Realmente me mueven el corazón. Because when I started working for the Farm Worker and Landscape Advocacy Project like 20 years ago, cuando empecé a trabajar con FLAP, que hace 20 años, empecé a ver todo el abuso que había contra las mujeres en los Estados Unidos. I just started seeing all the abuse against the minorities and the immigrant and migrant women and people of color, and I just couldn't believe it. Like, yo no lo podía creer, porque yo venía de un país como Colombia, running away from the violence there, venía de un país como Colombia, desesperada, huyendo de la violencia en Colombia, y quería encontrar un país con mejores garantías, con más seguridad, con no violaciones a los derechos humanos. Like, looking for a country where I thought I was not going to find violations about worker rights, and it was the opposite. So it really touched my heart. I do remember one case of a woman. Recuerdo el caso de una señora que estaba siendo explotada sexualmente en su trabajo, y tenía 4 niños esta señora, and she had 4 kids, and she didn't know what to do. And fortunately, we ran each other, and I was able to help her to run away from the abusive situation. So, gracias a Dios, pues nos encontramos, y yo le ayudé con todos los recursos que teníamos en FLAP para que huyera de esa situación. I don't want to take over and talk too much, but certainly this is a issue that is my passion, and I want to work more with you, Leonie, on these issues. We just hired Michelle Velasquez, and Michelle is here to support our advocacy work. Nosotros acabamos de contratar a Michelle. Michelle está aquí para apoyarnos con todo este trabajo de advocacy and support women's rights, and FLAP is here. I want to highlight very quickly what Asia said during the pandemic. Quiero resaltar un poquito lo que Asia dijo durante la pandemia. Las mujeres fueron las más abusadas, fueron las que perdieron sus trabajos the most. So the women were the most abused people, and it was very sad to see in the factories how they were choosing between women and men, and the men will still be working, and the woman was laid off because no more work was there. Entonces las despidieron, y eran mujeres con familia. We did our part. We helped with financial assistance. I have an amazing team who was very dedicated, and we were able to distribute almost $2 million in financial assistance. Entregamos casi $2 millones en dinero efectivo a los trabajadores, y la mayoría de este dinero fue a las mujeres. Todavía tenemos dinero en efectivo en la organización para pagar la renta, utilities, y dinero en efectivo para pagar por financial assistance. So, por favor, reach out. So, thank you so very much for the space, Leonie, and this is an amazing opportunity to talk about women's rights, and please count on FLAP for whatever support you may need. Muchísimas gracias.
Thanks a lot. Alexandra. Muchas gracias to Alexandra, Executive Director of Farm Worker and Landscaper Advocacy Project, known as FLAP. We put in the chat their website and also how to reach out to them. So if you know people working, they don't have to be in Cairo, hundreds of miles from here in Southern Illinois, just on the edges of Chicago, and also landscaping all throughout the city. So they're doing really important work. I want to see if anyone has another comment, if anyone now we're all panelists, right? But if anyone who wasn't originally a panelist has any comment, or if we might have missed something in the chat, any question. If not, I will go ahead and probably ask something for some of the early panelists to see if they want to comment on. But let me see if anyone who has been listening, thank you for your attention. Yes. Cloud, did you have something? Your microphone went on.
Sí, solo quería agregar de que realmente trabajos o buenos trabajos, buenas oportunidades para personas, especialmente para mujeres de color, no realmente las hay. No, nosotras que venimos de otro país y nos ven que no hablamos.
Clau, a ver, habla.
¿Ya? ¿Me escucha? Sí, lo que decía era que la verdad es que como decimos en México, como te ven, te tratan. Lo que nosotros vemos en este país es que como te ven, o del color que te ven, es más o menos lo que deciden que te van a pagar. Entonces, nosotras por eso estamos empezando nuestro grupo, porque sentimos que si nosotras hemos estado como mamás, muchas de nosotras hemos estado como mamás por varios años, entonces no hemos trabajado y sentimos que si salimos a buscar trabajo nos van a ver de pronto de color. Obviamente muchas veces dicen que te pagan el mínimo, pero en realidad no te pagan ni el mínimo, porque algunas veces para llegar a un trabajo son 1 hora, 2 horas, muchas veces hasta 3 horas, por ejemplo, los trabajos de oficina, cada día extras. Entonces, en realidad, no te pagan ni siquiera el salario mínimo por el trabajo. Entonces, nosotras por eso quisimos empezar algo se puede decir desde cero, empezar a recaudar fondos, porque algún día, obviamente, nuestra esperanza es que tengamos pues crear nuestros propios no sé si después se puede llamar futuros empleos, ojalá, digo, es nuestra esperanza, la verdad. Y fue la única cosa que vimos, porque en cuanto vamos a un trabajo, a mí, por ejemplo, me veían con mis niños un poco blanquitos y me decían, siempre me preguntaban, oye, ¿eres babysitter? ¿Tú cuidas a los niños? Yo les decía siempre, no soy babysitter, son mis hijos. Porque siempre que nos ven, siempre que ven de qué color eres, o si no hablas inglés, obviamente lo primero que dicen, te vamos a pagar pues el mínimo, en ocasiones ni el mínimo, y en ocasiones no hay ni trabajos. Entonces, eso era lo único que quería agregar, que realmente vivimos un ambiente súper violento, como decían las muchachas, vivimos un ambiente súper violento en este país. Era todo. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, Claudia. Thank you very much. I think that I see the hand of Adriana McClintock. You want to go ahead, Adriana?
Hi, everyone. First of all, I want to thank the panelists tonight who have just done a remarkable job of sharing stories and information. And this discussion is so important, right? Because in all walks of life and in all areas of work, women are still being underpaid and undervalued. And I want to give you just a little bit of an arc. In the 90s, I started out working at the Ford Motor Company on the assembly plant. I was down there making cars. And it was during the height of, there were a bunch of sexual harassment claims that, you know, you walked into the building in the morning and you would see a ton of just disparaging graffiti and remarks and lewd pictures of women. And then you get on the floor and you're treated like an animal. And I didn't last long in that situation. And years later, I met Leone actually when I was working for the Laborers International Union of North America. And there I was the chairperson of the Women's Caucus. We started this caucus with a handful of women in Washington, D.C. The organization was just turning 100 years old. And for the first time, we were creating a women's caucus because we saw the need for specialized education. We saw the need for more safety equipment for women, more training, and we needed more opportunities for women to become leaders in the field of construction, in the fields of nursing and mail handlers. You know, we represented a large group of working people all over the US and Canada. And I got to tell you, you know, I thought we were making strides. There wasn't, after that we started that caucus, there wasn't a week that went by where I was not getting death threats, where I was called out of my name left and right. I was groped. I was had a lot of sexually inappropriate comments made towards me. And it was hard, you know, and here I was representing all of these women in the United States and Canada, and I was still a victim of this abuse. And so I've come sort of a long way. I've worked in nonprofit, I've worked in a lot of organizations, I'm educated, I'm a professional working woman, and I gotta tell you, it's no different today. It is no different being in a group of professional people, grown men, still behaving in the same way. And so I don't say this to you because I want to offer a grim outlook, but I want to say that we are building momentum and we're coming into a different time. And this stuff is not tolerable anymore. It just isn't. So the more we have these dialogues, the more that we are talking about these issues and bringing them to light, the more that we are supporting each other as sisters and fighting for rights. And that means the way that you vote. It means the way that you handle yourself at your job. And it means that the way that you are bringing up your family and how you are raising your sons to teach women, it's all important. So I just want to encourage you to keep the faith, keep fighting. It's a tough job. And we do wear a lot of hats. You know, I'm a single mom now, I'm a widow, and I think that might be the toughest job that I have. But I want to offer each and every one of you just a little light at the end of the tunnel, because I do believe we're heading into a new time. And I encourage you to keep engaging, keep talking about your stories, and don't let anyone treat you with anything less than respect. And if you are in a situation with your job, you document everything. You document the person, the time, the date, and you establish a pattern of behavior so that you can take it to HR. I know that it isn't always the most effective thing, and that there are times that people aren't fair and HR isn't always going to protect you, but at the very least, you put it on record. So that's all I had to say. Thank you.
That was a lot. Yeah, that was a lot. I remember, Adriana, when we met a long time ago, and I remember that situation, and I won't go into much detail, but I will say it was very disappointing. 15, 18 years ago.
A while.
a long time here in Chicago that when we reached out, and I'm going to leave out names and organizations and everything, but when we reached out to, let's say, many well-known and respected male activists in labor groups and others in the Chicago area about your and other women's particular problems, even within organizations that said they were fighting for worker and women's rights. Literally none of the 1 dozen, 2 dozen people we reached out to, men, were willing to openly support you. I know because I helped do the asking, and I'm not going to say I wouldn't have found anyone, but I kind of gave up, and I think I was like the only male. And I was new to Chicago at the time and did not have the connections to do as much as I wish I could have. But it was a stark reminder. How many males were like, hey, good luck, that's cool, but like, I don't want to be brought into this. Like, don't put my name and organization out there because I might have problems. And I think I was the only one that told you, use my name, use my organization. I don't care if I'm fired, I don't care. And partly because my mom, who's from Mexico, was a community activist and was a single mom for a while when I was a little guy. And I saw what she went through in the Chicana movement a long time ago, and she and other women, were not taken as seriously many times. And I remember seeing that, and I can't really understand it as a male, even though obviously I didn't like it that it was happening to my mom. But I think it left an impression on me because I could see how hurt she was when she worked her butt off for the whole community. And she definitely was kind of pushed aside, even when she was on like boards of directors and stuff. So, one thing I tell other men, because I also have to keep in front of me my own contradictions, right, that this society raises me to think, which is that I'm superior to women. And, imagine the deformation that we give, obviously women, but I'm thinking even a little boy, when we tell him that he is somehow superior to other types of humans. And the kind of deformation, right, that creates in that little person who wasn't born that way. And I think we really have a long way to go. But I'm also heartened, though, because I think when I started to face my own contradictions as a male who's taught to be that I'm smarter and more powerful than women, and it was probably about 1992, 93, when I had a great mentor. And when we talked about some of these issues, he told me that, you're going to be surprised, Leona, because the more any of us, right? Just I was the person at that moment, whether with women, with people of color, with poor workers, all the ways we're taught to not treat other people with respect, especially as males. And I remember he told me that you'll be surprised because as you face those contradictions that in you that are really ugly as a male, you'll find that as you're liberated, you're going to help other males realize that they can do it too, and that our sense of identity and our sense of security doesn't need to be based on putting down other people, half of humanity, which are women. And that actually it's a freeing thing to go, oh my gosh, I don't have to always know the answer, always know how to fix a car, always know everything, right? And always be tough, and I can cry. And so I don't think that men realize enough how much we can be liberated. Frankly, whether we are or not doesn't matter, because women need the support. And again, what I tell folks who are really focused on labor is, how do you win this with half of our workers not involved, which are women? And in addition, the curious thing to me in the farm worker movement and in other movements I've been involved with and in Working Family Solidarity, the majority of the most active and dedicated and committed member leaders have been and still are women. That's probably for another discussion, but in our organization, that's probably the truth. I see that we're at 7:26. I don't want to cut things off so we can go maybe a little longer. We also want to end on time or just a little after. I don't know if anyone has anything else to say. Obviously, this is a huge topic and we're not done. None of these topics end. The idea is that maybe we all think of something new. there's not a lot of men and males on this call. I know there's a couple actually younger brothers on this call because I see them. But hopefully we can be reminded of your words, Adriana and others, that we need to kind of get our stuff together. Would anyone who has spoken or anyone who has not, would anyone like to say anything? Would anyone like to write anything in the chat? If you've spoken before and want to say something else, any of the people, any of the women who offered opening remarks, anyone else?
Michelle?
Hi, thanks. First of all, I wanted to say thank you for this space. This was really, I guess, empowering to listen to everyone's experiences. And as Alexandra said, I am new at FLAP and I'm the advocacy coordinator, bilingual advocacy coordinator there. And honestly, I just wanted to uplift what Asia was presenting at the last bit of the panelists, definitely echoing that the need for safe spaces in the workplace, especially for POC and women, but also wanting to add on there into the conversation, those safe spaces are also important for folks in the LGBT community, is specifically, if people would, want to be regarded in a specific way or want to feel included as well. So definitely the sources that Asia shared in the chat were really valuable, especially because I feel like a lot of workplaces are dismissive to having those conversations, starting those conversations, or think it's like more work to put into having trainings on like anti-racism or trainings on just inclusivity. So I think, also wanting to add that on, but definitely thank you again for the space. And I don't want to add a lot more time to this. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Michelle. I'm glad you said something. We'll end quite soon, but we do have time if someone else would like to say anything we've touched on, something new. Again, obviously this is scratching the surface, and now we actually have to go out there and do something. But if anyone would like to add any other comment, please do.
I want to say one other thing because I think this is important. And I spend a lot of time in various DEI training. And I think that one part of it that we have to be cognizant of is that we as women, we're so stretched thin, and we have to make self-care a priority. We have to make time to restore ourselves in whatever way we can, whether that's like, shutting everything down and, like putting the kids to bed early one night, or, saying no to a commitment, whatever the case is. I want to just remind you all that you are important, and you need to take care of yourself just like you would take care of somebody else. Don't forget that part.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Very, very much. I see things in the chat. Those are good stuff. Monique, our Southsider. Thanks a lot, Monique. I saw what you put in there also, Sharon. Thanks a lot. Evergreen Park in the house here in Chicago. Far South Side as well. Thanks a lot for being here. I think we'll probably end it, and you all know what I mean, and especially the majority women on this call know better than I do, that this is barely scratching the surface. And again, to the males on the call, there's only a few of us, but I just want to say that I think we're going to be a lot stronger as human beings, human beings, if we can kind of relearn that our self-identity and our security doesn't have to exist because we put down and think less of other people. And unfortunately, we're taught to do that with women. And I think we don't get over that until we admit that all of us, including myself, executive director of an organization, doesn't matter. None of that takes away the fact that I'm a male, right? Patriarchal beard. And I think I'm the smartest guy in the room if there's women. We all, it's like alcoholics. We're not going to get better until we say, you know, I'm a sexist and a male chauvinist, you know, and I want to get over that, right? And I think unless we do that, we won't win the labor fight. We just won't, because we can't have workers oppressing other workers. So it can't be blacks against Latinx. It can't be men against women. It can't be straight against, you know, the LGBTQ community. We have to all be workers first, right? Producing for the wealthy elite in this country that find brilliant ways to keep us from thinking we're natural allies. I think the biggest one of those is racism. That's my opinion, because you can see someone and it's automatic. But I also think sexism and misogyny is right up there. And then, you know, homophobia and so many others. But in my lifetime, just for me, I found that every time I've tried to organize workers at the workplace or at home as workers, the boss, big or little, always plays the race card and the gender card and the gender identity card, and anything to keep us from realizing that we can build something much better together as workers, right? So really appreciate everyone here for being here. Appreciate every one of you. To the 5 particular panelists, thank you very much. To the people here, again, a whole bunch of different neighborhoods from Chicago and a couple places outside the state and even from Europe. Thanks a lot, Brigida. Great woman. We used to live in Sicily. She's in Paris right now. Thanks again to FLAP, right? The Farm Worker and Landscaper Advocacy Project. They're doing great work with all workers, and they also talk about what's up with women too. So thank you very, very much. We'll talk about the next teach-in soon, and we really appreciate you being here with us. Have a really terrific evening. Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone. My last thank you is to Somos Sur. I mentioned them at the first, of course. So, but the collective who did the interpretation, Cristal Zaragoza, Juliana Ramirez. Thanks to them, and thanks to all of you for making time this evening. Have a great evening.
Good night.
Thank you so very much.